Hey everyone, thanks for joining in. Here we are. Right now, it looks like our lobby is empty, but I promised I'd have something to talk about to get the conversation going. And I guess this week we want to talk about, especially for people looking to enter into tech, novices and people looking to um, who are just beginning or looking to move into the career. Um, and this happens in all professional industries, but I want to talk about gatekeeping in tech particularly. There was an interest little um, thread that went around where someone was talking about, like what was obviously a new person coming into his company, and he was saying like, "Oh yeah, we could tell that you're new," while you're talking on the meeting and stuff like that. And it was really disparaging. You know, um, the entire point of, well, not the point of being a novice, but the entire expectation of being a junior engineer is that you've got a lot to learn. And, you know, pretending like we were never there before while we were learning tech and growing tech and being introduced to tech uh, is, very negative. It definitely it definitely makes people who are already nervous about the about about the field to be even more nervous, to be even more reticent in terms of joining. We can talk for days and days about the toxic behavior that makes people self exclude them, self select out of out of the program, even though they might, most likely they have what it takes and can succeed in it. But like we get messages, you know, throughout our lives. Sometimes certain categories of people are like, "Oh well, you shouldn't be here." And it's something I mentioned before. Is like a lot of people misdiagnose this as as imposter syndrome. And I think the difference between imposter syndrome is that it's self-imposed, more or less. It's it's me saying to myself, "Oh, like I'm not at the level that I need to be among my peers," versus you know being told by outsiders repeatedly that you don't belong. That's I feel is different than imposter syndrome. It's you start you start taking that statement to heart and agreeing with it. So I think I think there are two very subtle differences between them. Those two conditions. Like I said, one is very much self-imposed, and the other is is more or less um, a forced, like an external mentality that comes from hearing a message repeatedly and repeatedly, not necessarily the words, but by actions, by you know, like getting no's on interviews, even though, like in every other regard you qualify for the position, and or having having a teacher, say, well, maybe you shouldn't be here, or having other peers saying, oh, you're not suited for this. So I think we're doing an injustice by lumping that in with imposter syndrome. Um, but you know, it's the behavior that really also limits. We keep saying it's a pipeline problem, but the pipeline has been, full of gunk and corrosive and toxic to people who would otherwise qualify to be great engineers. Anyway, today's office hour is going to be a little short because I'm I have to my my middle daughter actually um decided to start working at Starbucks, so she needs to head over there soon. But I'd love to hear from anyone. Leave a message. Um, I posted the link to join the StreamYard, and I'm just gonna just keep showing up here regularly every week. I know I missed last week, but again, I said it was my anniversary. But I'll just keep showing up and being consistent. Like I've told my some of the people I've had coffee chats with. Like consistency is the most important thing when trying to achieve um, positive results. And like it can be discouraging sometimes. Like doing something and not getting the results you expected, but be consistent about it. And you know, um, my wife kind of embodies that a lot. She wanted to uh, get into the acting field, and at first she was getting a lot of no's. Not any results that she wanted, but she just kept showing up, and then she started making a name for herself in the local area, like just by being there, being in the room. Um, you can get positive results. I believe that this is worth it. I'm looking forward to when, you know, we'll have multiple people, you know, commenting, asking questions, and have a very productive session weekly. But if I'm not here to provide that consistent um, pulse, heartbeat, rhythm of business, then no one will show up right. Anyway, it looks like someone else joined the lobby. No problem at all. KT, welcome aboard. I was just talking about, how we discussed that consistency is important um, for getting the results you wanted. Uh, you have any questions or anything to add to the conversation? That is a great question. Yeah, it's basically almost like anything else. You practice, you repeat it, and it becomes almost second nature. It's like think about when you were learning your multiplication tables or however they teach multiplication now. At first it was complicated, but by repeating, you just memorize. Like I can rattle off like I think my multiplication tables to 12 squared, I think, without even like doing the math. Um, and that's what's required for getting better with coding. You start seeing the same thing, and like you'll see the compilation error and know what it is right away, and be oh man, I forgot a semicolon at the end of this line. So yeah, that I think practice and getting your hands on keyboards is the most important thing to becoming a stronger developer. Good question, by the way. So I think what I can do is fire up a short clip from our content. All right. Let's see if we can. This is from last year's Black to the Future. All right. Session where we
Today, Bryce Sharp is a software engineer at Ookla and is a phenomenal developer, phenomenal
Black to the
He's a
Future.
speaker.
All right,
He's helped out at many
Where we-
Today, Bryce Sharp is a software engineer at Ookla and is a phenomenal developer, phenomenal
Black to the
He's
Future.
a speaker.
All right.
He's helped out at many Today, Bryce Sharp is a software engineer at Ookla and is a phenomenal developer, phenomenal He's a speaker. He's helped out at many Today, Bryce Sharp is a software engineer at Ookla and is a phenomenal developer, phenomenal He's a speaker. He's helped out at many Today,
Okay. See if we can start that over. We talked about this last week's office hour about why and I keep getting this feedback on my audio. I must have a window open. There we go. All right, I found it. Screen. All right. So, how prevalent are whiteboard tests and interviews? They are very common, and we talked about why they are on the last office hour. Basically, as the larger tech companies use it when they're interviewing, you know, recent college graduates or interns, because that's the only thing you can really verify for them is that, hey, did you learn anything during a degree? Um, and like it or not, that's almost the only way you can like gauge knowledge experience for a college grad. It expanded into um, using it for general interviews. And I think in some cases it's a filter because you get so many um, candidates for any one job posting that you know it's just another way to gauge um, or to almost like raise the bar for candidates. I mentioned that sometimes it's not always evenly applied. So that's where bias and inequality can creep in, is when one candidate is asked a question and another one isn't. You know, um, but what happened is basically like a lot of companies saw, hey, here's how here's how, you know, big tech company over here does their interviewing. Um, maybe it's time for us to use this approach. Uh, and when big tech company has their 1,000 applicants to one job posting, and small local company uses that same approach, they're going to eliminate. They're not even seeing the same uh, volume or caliber of candidates as the rest, and so they're going to not get the same benefit out of it that that big tech code gets. I do think there are better ways to um, provide and ask questions and you know discover if a candidate is qualified or what level of expertise they have. But until like it's not going to get evenly applied across the industry, and there's going to be that challenge of um, dealing with the whiteboard interview. I think one thing is that in many cases, um, the interviewer, they'll tell you outright, I'm not looking necessarily for the right answer. I'm looking for how you approach it. And, sometimes the question is asked in a way that, like they're trying to ask, do you know about topic X without like literally asking it. It's more about your thought process. What do you know from your studies? Like, do you know graph theory? Um, do you know how to use different data types and algorithms? And so they'll ask a question and apply a question, and they'll say use any language you want, you feel comfortable in. I would suggest that you use pseudo language. You don't try to you don't try to code in C# on a whiteboard, or JavaScript. Like basically pseudo language is you write your algorithm out in plain English. So if you can describe it in plain English, um, you'll be able to eventually implement it. But I think that's sometimes we put those uh, self dampeners on ourselves by saying, "Oh, I should try and write in compilation perfect syntax in C# on a whiteboard." You don't have a compiler. There'll be APIs that you won't remember. Just write it in plain English, and you know uh, you avoid all the a lot of overhead and details that you don't have. I think the other thing that's coming around with virtual interviews now is the pair coding, where you jump onto one of these like Leak Codes or one of these other platforms that allows you to code and share your screen. Um, and that is where it is more about how well do you know the details, and they'll also say pick whatever language you want. Um, that's where they will test on how well you know the details of your language, how experienced you are. And I think you know it's it's a little more forgiving than standing there with a whiteboard, but I would still use the same approach. You know, write out some comments and write out what you want the algorithm to do, and then implement it. Um, you know, basically, you want to communicate as much as you can what your thought process is, um, how you think to how you're thinking about going about approaching the solution to the problem.
Thank you so much for being here with me today, Bryce. Bryce Sharp is a software engineer at Ookla and is a phenomenal developer, phenomenal human being. He's a speaker. He's helped out at many meetups, and he's just a great vibe to be around. So thank you, honestly, for taking the time to be here with me today, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. Thank you for that kind intro.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Who are you and what was your way into tech?
Yeah, my name is Bryce Sharp. I'm a software engineer at Ookla. I did graduate from the University of Memphis with a double major in computer science and mathematics. But before that, I was a product of Memphis Public High School. I went to Central High School, and I think my journey in tech really started back then. I had an older brother who was 11 years older who was doing cool things in DOS, and I was like, wow, how does that work? And I was curious about it, and that curiosity just kept getting fed. 2000, I graduated in 2007, so kind of the mid 2000s, there were sidekicks, like tech was becoming cooler, but the iPhone hadn't quite hit the scene yet. And so there was still kind of that jock nerd mentality. And I think a lot of my peers really idolized people that I couldn't idolize. And I think that was difficult. So the coolest people in the school were Jay-Z, who was a rapper, and Michael Jordan, who was a basketball player. And the whole time I kept thinking, this is the right narrative, but these are the wrong role models. And what I mean by that is, I think as minorities, we only see millionaires who look like us, who are in sports or entertainment. And I think people get enamored. I know I definitely did, with the idea of sweat equity, where you could go in the basketball court and practice your jumper for 30 hours, and you could come out with just a nice jumper and just hit it every time. And your skills and the time you put in was sweat equity into your body of work and your capabilities. And then you use those capabilities to profit later. And I really love that idea. I always felt like a hustler, but I always thought the way we were hustling in sports and in music was wrong. I knew so many, this was before SoundCloud, I knew so many people who had a cassette with their tape that never saw the light of day. Confused me back then. And then now as an adult and as a professional software developer, I realized that I was right. A lot of my peers were saying Jay-Z, Jay-Z is the coolest. He's so rich, he's going to be the guy. And if you look at it now, kids are still saying that. I mean, he's a billionaire. He's a black billionaire, and it's amazing. But Bill Gates is worth 129 times what he is. And I think that reality to me kind of says hey, you can only go so far entertaining the masses. And a lot of the people you entertain will not look like you, and you'll have to make creative concessions for that. But if you can provide real hard services in the tech world and have those actual skills and capabilities, they can take you a lot further. And that sweat equity and that's where I wanted to invest my sweat equity. And so I did, and I learned a bunch of programming skills. And in the beginning, it was, me just figuring it out. This was kind of early Stack Overflow, days when it was harder to acquire information. So you were just kind of trying things out. But then as I grew older, I really got ambitious, and I felt hey, I have skills here. I could put in the sweat to have these capabilities, and went out and found freelance clients and people who had a mom and pop cheesecake shop, people who had a little brick and mortar store, multiple sclerosis benefit called Brewfest. And I did these things for free. And I went and I said, hey, I need the skills. I need the practice. And so I really hustled, and it wasn't hustling for money. It was hustling for experience and credibility in the industry. And from there, I went and applied for jobs, and my resume day one, most of it's not on there today. I think there's a bullet point that says freelancing that kind of just lists them all. But my resume was 2 pages long with side projects that I had done that, showed my ambition and showed my drive to potential employers, and ultimately landed me a career here.
So you've touched on a couple things that I appreciate, and I can tell you, we grew up in similar backgrounds where the educated weren't really amplified, and they weren't really the role models that we had at that time. And it was the musician, the athlete. And so going with that mindset, and with the fact that there are a lower percentage of minorities in tech, why do you think
minorities can succeed in tech?
I think minorities can make good programmers because we're used to doing more with less. And I think, as a developer, like the less code you write, the less tech debt you have. Probably like it's not always less code is a better solution, but being thrifty with your compute cycles and being thrifty with just like your mental processes can help a lot. And also, I think the reality of growing up a minority in America tends to make you not sugarcoat things and helps you get to the real point in the end a little faster. So I definitely think that minorities, like there should be as many percentage of minorities who are programmers as there are of the majority, right? And that to me is an opportunity issue. And so there's less opportunity in impoverished neighborhoods. There's less computers. There's less internet access. There's less people who know about computers and have internet access. If you're struggling to pay the bills, the internet check is probably the first one to go. And then if you get into some of these impoverished neighborhoods and projects, like internet access isn't even an option. And so another reason why I think minorities are going to win in tech going forward is because more and more people are going to have access to that. And, it's been amazing what they've done here in Memphis with the Memphis City Schools. I mean, everything went digital, and all of a sudden these neighborhoods that had zero internet access at all, they drive these Wi-Fi hotspot trucks out there, and now these kids have internet at home where they didn't before. And so I think that gap of how much tech access there is going to close, and minorities will benefit from that. And then I think once we get in, the swag and just honestly the charisma and the doing more with less is going to lead to us dominating the industry, honestly.
I completely agree. And I will tell you, we do we have an organization here called GDG Memphis, Google Developers Group Memphis, and that is my main focus is these communities, because one thing that I've noticed, especially in Memphis and other cities, that when people from these communities get the resources, they don't throw it to the side. Instead, they thrive. They literally rise to the occasion, and it truly is a lack of opportunity and a lack of having the learning resources necessary to actually grow into this. And one thing that I always say is I try to be very vocal, and that's why I love this series. I get to interview people like you, is you never know who needs to hear that they're allowed to be in this space. And for me, it took me hearing that I was allowed to be in here to actually know it was possible. It was never talked about when I was growing up. Oh, you can be a developer. It wasn't even on our radar of opportunities. So I love the fact that that's something that you're bringing to the table as well. So I'm going to ask you the one question that I'm asking everybody. What do you think is the future for Black tech?
I mean, Wakanda, I think we've talked a lot about how role models weren't there. And I think, seeing T'Challa and seeing this advanced, natural haired African society that is dominating the world and is, better than everything and is the embodiment of what Black excellence can be. I mean, I think we're going to build that. I think we are building that. There's lots of people in our circle who, we have mutual friends who are breaking into this industry and are realizing, wait, it's really nice here. There's a lot of benefits here. We can all work from home. The salaries are really high. The technical skills are not automatable yet, so you're not going to lose your job to self-driving cars. And so I think that there's not a choice because these jobs are going to be the future, and that when minorities really gravitate towards that and get in there, we are going to take over and we're going to dominate. And I think another thing I think I should have said earlier about this is another reason why I think minorities are prone to dominate is because this is hard work. This is a lot of technical skills. You have to learn a lot. You have to spend the time to get these skills. And once you have them, no one can take them from you. But if you grew up easy with a silver spoon in your mouth, you're not necessarily motivated to work as hard as someone who's young and scrappy and who is wait, you mean if I just learn enough about this programming language and how to master it, they'll give me how much money to go sit in an office and do what? And it's going to be transformative. So I think that we are going to be a vital piece of minorities are going to be a vital piece of the tech landscape moving forward. We will be the charisma and the swag in a template kind of cookie cutter world where everybody wants to say like, hey, this is best, do it like this, just use, X framework. I'm trying not to endorse anything by name, X framework to do this. And, that will ultimately allow you to be beneficial versus us where it's like, hey, we want these things as cool as our swag, and we want these things to be hip and to solve real world problems that real world people have, and not the like Silicon Valley bubble.
I love that and completely agree. You've touched on so many good points. I feel like this has had to have sparked some inspiration or an idea in someone, and I hope they really take that further and explore it more. Bryce Sharp, software engineer at Ookla, thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure having you, and I can't wait to do something similar like this again with you in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. That was Bryce Sharp and Danny Thompson from last year's Black to Future conversation. You can find all of those on our YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thanks for the great questions, Casey. If you'd like to continue the conversation, just reach out to me at Brownie Points. And look forward to seeing everyone next week. Have a great day.